A black woman cheats on her husband, only to find herself caught in a web she never expected. Just as she thinks her mistake is buried, he reveals that he knows, and he has plans of his own. Plans that will leave her reeling, powerless and desperate to escape. How far will he go to make her pay for her betrayal, and what price will she pay to reclaim her life? Buckle up for a heart-wrenching story of revenge, redemption, and one woman's fight to rebuild after the ultimate betrayal. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The bedside lamp cast a soft amber glow across Teresa's bedroom, creating dancing shadows on the collection of framed photographs that lined her dresser. She picked up one particular photo, her favorite from their college graduation. Leon's bright smile matched her own as they held their diplomas, young and full of dreams. 12 years, she whispered, running her finger along the silver frame. Their story had started in that small college apartment, sharing instant noodles and big dreams. Now they lived in a mansion, but something vital was missing. Teresa reached for her phone, mindlessly scrolling through her social media feed. Photos of couples having dinner together, sharing weekend adventures, and simple moments made her heart ache. A friend's post showed her husband surprising her with breakfast in bed. When was the last time she and Leon had shared breakfast together? The antique clock on the wall ticked past midnight, its sound echoing through the empty house. Leon was supposed to be back from his business trip hours ago, but she hadn't received even a text. She stared at their last message exchange from 3 days ago, just a brief landing safely from him. Memories flooded back of their early days when Leon's first business venture had failed. They'd sat on their old couch, eating takeout, and she'd held his hand while he made plans to try again. She'd believed in him completely then, working extra shifts at the design firm to keep them afloat. Now his company was thriving, their bank account overflowing, but their emotional account had run dry. Teresa's finger hovered over the call button on her phone. Maybe she should check on him. But the thought of interrupting another important meeting made her hesitate. She set the phone down, the weight of their growing distance settling heavily on her shoulders. Finally, exhaustion won over loneliness. Teresa slipped under the cool sheets, pulling the blanket tight around her shoulders. The empty space beside her felt vast and cold. As her eyes grew heavy, she let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, Leon would be there when she woke up. The soft click of the front door stirred Teresa from her light sleep. Morning light filtered through the curtains as she heard familiar footsteps moving toward the kitchen. She slipped on her robe and followed the sound, finding Leon already scrolling through his phone, his designer briefcase perched on the marble counter. "Hey," she said softly, moving to the coffee maker. Leon glanced up briefly. "Morning, just got in." His eyes returned to the screen, thumbs tapping rapidly. Teresa poured coffee for both of them and popped bread in the toaster. The kitchen was quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and Leon's occasional sighs at his emails. She placed his coffee beside him, careful not to disturb his concentration. "Thanks," he muttered, taking an absent sip. "I've got to head to Chicago next week. 3 days, maybe 4. Teresa spread butter on the toast, sliding a piece toward him. "My design project for the Wilson account is keeping me busy too. But I was thinking about our anniversary next month." "Right, we should do something." Leon's eyes remained fixed on his phone. "Maybe that trip we talked about?" "The Bahamas could be nice," Teresa offered, trying to catch his eye. "White sand beaches, clear water." "Sure, sounds good. Have your assistant coordinate with mine for the dates." He took a quick bite of toast. "The resort we discussed before should work." Teresa wrapped her hands around her warm coffee mug. "It would be nice to spend some time together, just us." "Mm-hmm," Leon responded, already standing and gathering his things. "Got an early meeting. We'll figure out the details later." She watched as he straightened his tie, grabbed his briefcase, and headed for the door. His expensive cologne lingered in the air as he moved past her, barely pausing as he said goodbye. The door closed behind him with a decisive click. Teresa stood in the suddenly quiet kitchen, her half-eaten toast growing cold. The space felt larger somehow, emptier. With a deep breath, she gathered her own things, ready to lose herself in work for another day. The corner cafe buzzed with lunchtime chatter as Teresa slid into her usual seat across from Grace. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, highlighting the steam rising from their coffee cups. "There's my girl." Grace's warm smile brightened the space. "I ordered your usual vanilla latte, extra shot." "You're the best." Teresa managed a small smile, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Grace tilted her head, studying her friend's face. "So, big anniversary coming up, right? Got anything special planned?" "Oh yeah," Teresa nodded, stirring her coffee absently. "We're thinking about the Bahamas." "The Bahamas, that sounds amazing." Grace's enthusiasm faded slightly as she noticed Teresa's lack of excitement. "Hey, is everything okay?" "Of course," Teresa answered too quickly, forcing a bright smile. "Just busy with work, you know how it is." Grace reached across the table, touching Teresa's hand gently. "Hon, I've known you since we shared that tiny dorm room. Something's off." Teresa's shoulders slumped slightly. "It's nothing really, just..." She paused, looking down at her coffee. "Leon and I were both so caught up in our careers. Sometimes it feels like we're living separate lives." "Have you talked to him about it?" "When would I?" Teresa gave a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "He's always traveling, and when he is home, he's buried in his phone." "Remember when you two would skip class just to hang out at that old coffee shop?" Grace smiled, prompting a genuine chuckle from Teresa. "And Leon would try to impress me with his terrible poetry," Teresa added, her eyes softening at the memory. "This trip could be good for you both," Grace suggested. "A chance to reconnect, away from all the distractions." As they stood to leave, Grace pulled Teresa into a tight hug. "Make the most of it, sweetie. Sometimes we all need a little reminder of why we fell in love in the first place." Teresa nodded against her friend's shoulder, feeling a small spark of optimism as she headed back to her office, her mind already filling with possibilities for the trip. The evening light filtered through their living room's tall windows as Teresa settled onto their plush leather couch. Leon sat nearby, his attention fixed on his phone's glowing screen. "I found the perfect resort," Teresa said, opening her laptop to show him the pictures. "It's right on the beach, and they have these beautiful private villas." Leon mumbled, his thumbs tapping rapidly on his phone. "Look at this," she continued, turning the screen toward him. "There's a candlelit restaurant right on the beach, and they offer couples massages at their spa." Leon glanced up briefly. "Sounds nice, honey, whatever you think is best." Teresa felt her enthusiasm deflating. "I thought we could try snorkeling together. The reviews say the reef is amazing and—" "That's fine," he interrupted, frowning at something on his screen. "Book whatever activities you want." "Leon," she said softly, "this is our anniversary trip. Don't you want to plan it together?" He finally looked up, offering a distracted smile. "I trust your judgment. You always plan everything perfectly." "But I want us to do this together," she pressed. "We could take evening walks on the beach, watch the sunset." Sure, he nodded, his attention already back on his phone. "Just let me know how much it costs and I'll transfer the money." Teresa closed her laptop slowly, the excitement she'd felt while planning now replaced with a familiar emptiness. She stood up, hugging the computer to her chest. "I'll go start packing," she said quietly, though she doubted Leon even heard her. In their bedroom, she pulled out their suitcases, trying to hold on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this trip would help them find their way back to each other. The Bahamas welcomed them with a symphony of colors: crystal blue waters, swaying palm trees, and cotton candy clouds painted across the sky. Teresa breathed in the salty air, letting the warm breeze brush against her face. "Isn't it beautiful?" she whispered, turning to Leon. He barely looked up from his phone. "Yeah, looks nice." A cheerful staff member approached them with a tray of fruit-garnished drinks. "Welcome to Paradise Cove. I'm Maria, and I'll be showing you around." Teresa accepted her drink with a grateful smile, while Leon absently reached for his, still typing emails one-handed. Their beachfront suite took Teresa's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed an endless expanse of ocean, and their private balcony seemed to float above the gentle waves below. "Look at this view," Teresa exclaimed, drawing back the curtains. "We can watch the sunset right from our room." Leon nodded, settling into a chair with his laptop. I need to prep for tomorrow's meeting. It's with our Asian partners, so the time difference is tricky. But we just got here, Teresa said softly. Maybe we could explore the resort first. Maria mentioned there's a wonderful restaurant right on the beach. Sure, dinner sounds good, Leon replied, not looking up. Just let me finish this first. As evening approached, they made their way to the beachside restaurant. Tiki torches lined the path, and tables dotted the sand. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Teresa watched as Leon finally set his phone down. He looked at her and smiled. A real smile, the kind she hadn't seen in months. Her heart lifted as their drinks arrived, and for a moment, she caught a glimpse of the man she'd fallen in love with. They ate their meal in comfortable quiet, the sound of waves providing a peaceful backdrop. It wasn't the passionate reunion she'd dreamed of, but as Leon reached for his water glass instead of his phone, Teresa felt a tiny spark of hope. Sunlight streamed through the windows as Teresa stirred awake. Her hand reached across the bed, finding only empty space and a folded piece of paper. Her heart sank as she read Leon's hastily scrawled note. Had to fly back for an emergency meeting. Sorry, we'll call later. L. Her fingers trembled as she dialed his number, straight to voicemail. She tried again, her breathing quickening with each unanswered ring. Standing in their half-unpacked suite, Teresa noticed Leon's side of the closet was bare except for a few casual shirts. His briefcase and laptop were gone. She sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching the note. At the front desk, a sympathetic clerk shook her head. I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith. Your husband didn't leave any additional messages. He arranged for a taxi very early this morning. Teresa wandered the resort grounds, past happy couples holding hands and families splashing in the pool. The paradise around her felt hollow now. She stopped at a beachside cafe, ordering a coffee she barely tasted. Would you like to book any activities today? A cheerful staff member asked. No, thank you, Teresa replied quietly, watching a couple taking selfies by the water. She pulled out her phone, checking flight schedules back home. Her finger hovered over the Book Now button, but something held her back. Maybe he would call. Maybe he would return. As the sun began to set, Teresa found a quiet spot on the beach. She hugged her knees to her chest, watching the waves roll in and out. The same waves that had seemed so magical yesterday now felt like they were washing away the last pieces of her marriage. Tears slid down her cheeks as she remembered their wedding day, the promises they'd made, the dreams they'd shared. The distance between them had grown so vast, she wasn't sure they could find their way back to each other anymore. The morning sun cast dancing reflections on the pool water as Teresa walked along its edge, lost in thought. Her sandal caught on an uneven tile, and she stumbled forward with a gasp. Strong hands steadied her before she could fall. Whoa, careful there, a warm voice said. Teresa looked up to find concerned brown eyes studying her. The stranger smiled, releasing her arm once she was stable. Thank you, she managed, straightening her sundress. I'm Josh, he said, extending his hand. Professional photographer and amateur lifesaver. Despite herself, Teresa smiled. Teresa, though I hope you won't need to save me again. They fell into easy conversation as they stood by the pool. Josh's friendly demeanor and genuine interest in their chat helped Teresa relax. Are you enjoying the resort? He asked. She hesitated. I'm here alone, actually. Josh nodded sympathetically, not pressing for details. Well, I'd be happy to show you around. I've been here a week already, photographing for their new brochure. Grateful for the distraction, Teresa accepted. They walked through the lush resort gardens, Josh pointing out hidden spots perfect for photos. He shared stories about his travels, and Teresa found herself laughing at his adventures. What about you? He asked as they strolled along the beach. What brings you here? I needed a break, she said simply, appreciating how he didn't push for more. They spent the afternoon exploring the resort's quieter corners, talking about their careers and sharing travel stories. Josh's easy manner and attentive listening made Teresa feel truly heard for the first time in months. As sunset approached, they ended up back at the pool area. Thanks for letting me be your tour guide today, Josh said. Would you like to join me for drinks by the pool tonight? They make amazing mojitos here." Teresa smiled, surprised by how much she'd enjoyed his company. "I'd like that." The pool lights shimmered like stars on the water as Teresa approached the bar area. Her heart fluttered when she spotted Josh waving from a cozy corner setup with cushioned chairs. "I was hoping you'd come," he said, pulling out a chair for her. They ordered mojitos, and Josh's easy smile helped calm her nerves. "So tell me more about your photography," she said, grateful for a safe topic. "Oh, you don't want to get me started," he laughed. "I'll talk your ear off about lighting and composition all night." As the evening progressed and their glasses emptied, Teresa felt her guard lowering. The tropical breeze carried the sweet scent of flowers, and Josh's attentive presence made her feel surprisingly comfortable. "You seem like you're carrying something heavy," Josh observed gently during a lull in conversation. Teresa traced the rim of her glass with her finger. "My marriage," she admitted quietly. "It's not what it used to be." Josh leaned forward, his eyes full of understanding. "I know something about that. My ex and I, we grew apart so slowly we didn't notice until it was too late." His honesty touched something in Teresa. "Leon, my husband, he's always working. Even here, She stopped, taking a shaky breath. "He left yesterday for a meeting." Josh's hand brushed hers briefly. "That must hurt." "It does," she whispered, fighting back tears. "Sometimes I wonder if he even sees me anymore." They talked for hours, Josh listening as she opened up about the loneliness, the distance, the feeling of being second to a career. Each time their hands touched, Teresa felt a spark of connection that both comforted and troubled her. Later, alone in her room, Teresa lay in bed wide awake. The ceiling fan whirred softly as she wrestled with her emotions, grateful for Josh's kindness but guilty about sharing such intimate details about her marriage with a stranger. Her wedding ring felt heavy on her finger as she finally drifted off to sleep. The resort bar glowed with warm light as Teresa slipped onto a bar stool, ordering a strong drink. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the glass, trying to drown the ache in her chest. That's when she heard Josh's gentle voice beside her. "Rough day?" he asked, sliding onto the stool next to her. She nodded, unable to hold back the tears that had been threatening all day. Josh moved closer, his presence steady and comforting. "I just feel so," Teresa's voice cracked. "So alone." The bartender kept their glasses full as Teresa poured out her heart. Josh listened intently, his hand occasionally brushing her arm in comfort. The alcohol warmed her blood, loosening her tongue and her inhibitions. "Leon hasn't really seen me in years," she confessed, her words slightly slurred. "I'm just furniture in his life now." Josh's eyes were soft with understanding. "You deserve better than that, Teresa." "Want to walk with me?" he suggested after her third drink. "The fresh air might help." They wandered down to the beach, drinks in hand. The moon cast silver light across the waves, and Teresa found herself leaning against Josh for support. His arm slipped around her waist, steady and strong. "You're an amazing woman," Josh murmured, turning to face her. "Anyone would be lucky to have you in their life." Teresa felt dizzy with emotion and alcohol. When Josh suggested they go to his room, she knew she should say no, but the loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long made her nod instead. His room was dark and cool. As Josh drew her close, Teresa felt years of neglect and longing surge through her. His kiss was gentle, nothing like Leon's businesslike pecks. She knew this was wrong, but in that moment she couldn't bring herself to care. Later, as she lay in Josh's bed, the weight of what she'd done settled over her like a heavy blanket. Sleep came eventually, but it brought no peace. Sunlight pierced through the curtains, jolting Teresa awake. Her head throbbed as reality crashed over her. Josh's arm lay draped across her waist and panic seized her chest. She carefully slipped from beneath the covers, gathering her scattered clothes with trembling hands. "I have to go," she whispered when Josh stirred, not meeting his eyes. Back in her room, Teresa's phone lit up with notifications. Her heart stopped when she saw Leon's message. "I saw you." The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. Bile rose in her throat as she realized the magnitude of what had happened. She snatched up the phone, dialing Leon's number with shaking hands. "Leon, please," she begged his voicemail. "Let me explain, please call me back." She left message after message, each more desperate than the last. A knock at her door made her jump. Josh stood there, concern etched on his face. "Teresa, are you okay?" "Please leave," she said, backing away. This was a terrible mistake. Alone again, Teresa paced her room, her mind racing. How had Leon known? The resort security cameras flashed through her mind, or maybe someone working for him had followed her. The thought made her skin crawl. She threw her belongings into her suitcase, hands shaking so badly she could barely zip it closed. Josh tried to catch her eye in the lobby, but she hurried past him, shame burning in her chest. In the taxi to the airport, Teresa clutched her phone, willing it to ring. But Leon's silence spoke volumes. As her flight took off, she pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching paradise disappear beneath the clouds, knowing she was flying home to face the consequences of her actions. Teresa's key trembled in the lock as she stepped into their home. The familiar warmth of their house had been replaced by a chill that made her shiver. Leon sat in his leather armchair, his face carved from stone, waiting. "I can explain," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Explain what?" Leon's words cut through the air like ice. "How I watched my wife stumble drunk into another man's room. How security footage showed you didn't leave until morning." Tears spilled down Teresa's cheeks. "I felt so alone, Leon. You left me there on our anniversary." "Don't you dare turn this around on me," he snapped, standing up. "I had an emergency meeting, yes, but I was planning to come back. Instead, I find you throwing yourself at the first man who showed you attention. That's not fair. You've been absent for months, years even. You needed what? To destroy everything we built?" Leon's voice rose. "I worked hard for us, Teresa. Everything I did was for our future. And you repay me by sleeping with a stranger?" "I was wrong," Teresa pleaded. "I know that. But you left me alone on our anniversary trip. Do you know how that felt?" "I left for one day." Leon's fist slammed against the wall. "One day, Teresa. I was coming back to surprise you. I had plans for us, real plans to fix things, and you couldn't even wait 24 hours before betraying me." Teresa sank onto the couch, her body shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Leon's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained cold. "If you want to prove you're truly sorry, if you want to save this marriage, you'll need to help me with my new business venture." Teresa looked up, wiping her tears. "What do you mean?" "I'm starting a new project," he said firmly. "Your participation is non-negotiable if you want us to move forward." Teresa nodded quickly, desperate to grab onto any chance of redemption. "Yes, anything. Whatever you need." But as she agreed, something in Leon's expression made her stomach twist with unease. Sunlight streamed through the living room windows as Leon spread documents across their glass coffee table. Teresa sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "This is your chance," Leon said, his voice smooth and controlled. "A luxury designer line under your name. It's perfect for your talents." Teresa picked up the first page, scanning the elegant letterhead. "My name? But how?" "I've arranged everything. The loans, the partnerships, all of it." Leon's fingers drummed against the table. "Consider it your path to redemption." Her eyes caught on phrases like personal liability and collateral assets buried in the dense legal text. These loans, they seem substantial. "Trust me," Leon said, placing his hand over hers. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "This is how you can prove yourself to me, to us. Show me that you're committed to our future." Teresa's throat felt tight as she flipped through the pages. The numbers made her head spin, and legal terms blurred together. "Should we maybe have a lawyer look at—" "Don't you trust me?" Leon's voice hardened slightly. "After what happened, I thought you'd want to show me I can trust you again." Guilt washed over her. She picked up the pen with trembling fingers. "That's right," Leon encouraged. "Sign here. And here." He flipped through pages, pointing out signature lines. "This is your chance to make things right." Teresa signed page after page, trying to ignore the growing knot in her stomach. When she finished, Leon gathered the papers with efficient movements. "Perfect," he said, standing. "This will be good for us, you'll see." As he left the room, Teresa watched his retreating back, wondering if she'd just made another mistake. But she pushed the thought away, clinging to hope that somehow this would bridge the gap between them. Teresa sat at her desk, poring over fabric swatches and design sketches. The new office buzzed with activity, but she felt strangely hollow inside. Leon hadn't spoken more than 10 words to her at breakfast, maintaining the frosty silence that had become their new normal. "Mrs. Smith," her assistant poked her head in, "the production meeting starts in 5 minutes." Nodding, Teresa gathered her materials. As she walked to the conference room, she noticed Leon in his office, speaking intently on the phone. When he saw her, he turned his chair away. During the meeting, Teresa presented her latest designs to the team. Her voice remained steady and professional, masking the turmoil beneath. As she discussed timelines with the production manager, her eye caught a document on the table, a purchase order she hadn't authorized. "I don't remember approving this order," she said, reaching for the paper. "Oh, Mr. Smith signed off on it yesterday," the manager replied casually. Later, Teresa knocked on Leon's office door. "We need to talk about these unauthorized purchases." "Do we?" Leon barely glanced up from his computer. "I'm handling the financial side. You just focus on the designs." "But the loans are in my name. I should have a say." "After what you did?" His voice carried a sharp edge. "You're hardly in a position to make demands about trust, Teresa." She felt the familiar sting of shame. "I'm trying here, Leon. I really am." "Then try by doing what you're told." He turned back to his work, dismissing her. That evening, Teresa sat alone in her office, surrounded by sketches and fabric samples. The weight of mounting debts and Leon's coldness pressed down on her shoulders. She picked up a financial statement, her name bold across the top, the numbers growing larger each week. A realization settled over her like a cold shadow. She wasn't a partner anymore, not in the business or their marriage. She was just a signature, a name on papers, a way for Leon to maintain control while punishing her for her mistake. Teresa's hands trembled as she reviewed the latest financial reports. The numbers didn't lie. The business was hemorrhaging money at an alarming rate. Loan after loan appeared in the records, all bearing her signature, though she'd never seen most of them before. "Leon, we need to talk about these loans," she said, barging into his office with a stack of papers. "The debt is massive, and it's all in my name." He barely looked up from his desk. "You made your choices, Teresa. Now you deal with the consequences." "This isn't about what happened in the Bahamas anymore, is it?" Her voice cracked. "You're deliberately trying to ruin me." "You ruined yourself," he replied coldly. "I'm just making sure you understand the cost of betrayal." The next day, Teresa sat across from an accountant, her stomach churning as he explained her situation. "These contracts make you personally liable for all debts," he said, adjusting his glasses. "The business structure offers you no protection." "But I didn't authorize half of these loans," she protested. "The documents show your signature on everything. Legally, you're responsible." That evening, she confronted Leon in their living room. "You set me up," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You never intended to forgive me or save our marriage. This was all about revenge." Leon's face remained emotionless. "You owed me, Teresa. After what you did, this is the least you can do to make things right." "Make things right?" She laughed bitterly. "You're destroying me financially." "You should have thought about consequences before sleeping with Josh," he said, his voice ice cold. "Consider this your penance." Leaving the accountant's office later that week, Teresa felt the full weight of Leon's betrayal crushing her. The morning sun offered no warmth as she walked to her car, understanding at last that she'd been manipulated into her own destruction. Teresa's heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked past the break room, her mind consumed with the mounting business troubles. Then, A hushed conversation caught her attention. "I heard they were at La Maison again last night," a female voice whispered. "Rachel practically lives there with him now." "Poor Mrs. Smith has no idea," another voice responded. "Mr. Smith and Rachel don't even try to hide it anymore." Teresa froze, her blood running cold. The pieces started falling into place. Leon's late nights, his cold demeanor, the way he'd been treating her since the Bahamas. She steadied herself against the wall, her chest tight with pain. That afternoon, she marched into Leon's office, her hands shaking. "We need to talk about Rachel." Leon barely glanced up from his computer. "What about her?" "Don't play dumb with me," Teresa's voice cracked. "The whole office is talking about your affair." "And?" His response was casual, almost bored. "How long has this been going on?" Teresa demanded, her eyes filling with tears. Leon finally looked at her, his face devoid of emotion. "Long enough. What does it matter now? You're hardly in a position to judge, given your vacation activities. So all of this, the business, the loans, it was never about saving our marriage?" "No," he said coldly. "It was about keeping you exactly where I needed you, trapped and useful. Rachel understands business. You're just here to shoulder the debt and maintain appearances." The truth hit Teresa like a physical blow. "You're a monster," she whispered. "I'm practical," he corrected, standing up. "And you've served your purpose well. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a dinner meeting." He walked past her without another glance, leaving Teresa standing alone in his office, the weight of his betrayal crushing her chest. Teresa sat across from the lawyer, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The modern office, with its wall of legal books and certificates, felt suffocating as she explained her situation. "So you see, I signed these documents when things were complicated between us," Teresa said, her voice trembling. "I thought it would help save my marriage." The lawyer, Mrs. Chen, adjusted her glasses as she studied the contracts. Her expression grew more serious with each page she turned. "Mrs. Smith, I need to be direct with you. These documents make you personally liable for all business debts and obligations. But surely there must be something we can do." Teresa leaned forward, desperate for hope. Mrs. Chen shook her head slowly. "The contracts are ironclad. Your husband structured this very carefully. You're the sole guarantor for all financial responsibilities while he maintains operational control." Teresa's stomach dropped. "What are my options?" "They're limited," Mrs. Chen said gently. "You could declare personal bankruptcy, but that would devastate your credit for years. Selling personal assets might help offset some debt, but given the amount involved..." She trailed off, her implication clear. "So he's won," Teresa whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "He's trapped me completely." "I understand this is overwhelming," Mrs. Chen said, sliding a box of tissues across her desk. "But you need to protect whatever assets you have left. Your husband has effectively created a situation where you bear all the risk while he maintains control." Teresa stood on shaky legs, gathering her purse. The weight of her situation pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. As she walked toward the door, each step felt heavier than the last, the reality of her predicament sinking in deeper with every moment. Teresa's phone buzzed on her kitchen counter, displaying an unfamiliar number. Her hands shook as she answered the call from the mall's board of directors. "Mrs. Smith, we're calling to inform you that your husband has officially transferred all business ownership to you." The chairman's voice was formal, detached. "You are now the sole proprietor of the enterprise." The words hit her like a physical blow. She steadied herself against the counter, her coffee going cold beside her. "What do you mean? When did this happen?" "The paperwork was filed yesterday. Mr. Smith has removed himself completely from all business operations and responsibilities." After ending the call, Teresa rushed to the mall, her heart pounding. The familiar hallways felt different now, heavy with the weight of her new reality. She made her way to Leon's office, hoping to find him, to demand answers. But when she pushed open the door, she found only emptiness. The sleek desk was bare, the walls stripped of their artwork. No family photos, no awards, no trace of Leon remained. Only a single white envelope sat in the center of the desk. With trembling fingers, Teresa opened it and unfolded the note inside. "Teresa, I've decided to move on. The business and everything that comes with it is yours now. You wanted independence. Here it is. Leon." The paper crumpled in her grip as she stared at the vacant office. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the empty bookshelves and bare walls. Everything about the space felt wrong, hollow. She sank into the chair behind the desk, Leon's final act of cruelty sinking in. He had planned this all along, using her guilt, her desperate attempt to save their marriage, to set her up as his fall person. Now she was alone, trapped under the weight of a failing business and mounting debt, while he walked away clean. The silence of the empty office pressed in around her, broken only by the distant sounds of the mall coming to life for another day, a day she now faced as the unwilling owner of it all. Teresa's fingers hovered over her phone, scrolling through her contacts. Each name represented a potential lifeline, someone who might understand and help her through this crisis. With a deep breath, she started making calls. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important," Teresa said, her voice wavering. As she explained the situation, her mother's silence grew heavier. Finally, she spoke, her words sharp with disappointment. "Teresa, how could you let this happen? First the affair, and now this. I raised you better than this." The conversation ended quickly, leaving Teresa feeling worse than before. She tried her cousins next, then her Aunt Sarah, but each call followed the same pattern. Initial concern giving way to judgment and distance. "You really should have read those contracts more carefully," her aunt said before making an excuse to hang up. In desperation, Teresa reached out to her circle of friends. Some didn't answer at all, while others listened briefly before offering hollow sympathies and quick goodbyes. Finally, she called Grace, her last hope for understanding. "Oh, Teresa," Grace sighed over the phone. "I want to help, I really do. But you have to understand how this looks. The affair with Josh, the contracts you signed without reading. I care about you, but maybe this is a wake-up call." Teresa sat in her kitchen, the phone silent on the table before her. The house felt emptier than ever, the silence broken only by the steady tick of the clock on the wall. Each person she'd reached out to had pulled away, leaving her more isolated than before. She glanced at the family photos on her wall, smiling faces that now felt like strangers. The reality of her situation hit her fully. She was truly alone in this mess, without even the comfort of understanding from those she'd known longest. The phone rang for the 10th time that morning, and Teresa's hands shook as she declined another call from an unknown number. She knew who it was. Another creditor demanding payment she couldn't make. Her dining room table was covered with red-stamped envelopes and legal notices, each one screaming for attention. "Ms. Jones," a stern voice said in her voicemail, "this is your final warning regarding the outstanding balance." She deleted the message, unable to bear hearing more. Looking around her once beautiful home, she saw only items that needed to be sold. Her designer wardrobe, carefully curated over years, was already listed online. The antique mirror her grandmother had given her waited by the door for pickup. "I can list the house for a quick sale," the real estate agent said, walking through her living room, "but you'll have to price it well below market value to move it fast enough." Teresa nodded numbly, watching the agent make notes. Another piece of her life, gone. That evening, she sorted through her belongings, creating piles. Sell, donate, keep. The keep pile grew smaller by the hour. Her wedding china, the artwork from their honeymoon, even her car. Everything had to go to satisfy the creditor's demands. "The bank requires immediate action on these business loans," her financial advisor warned during their meeting. "If you can't make the payments, bankruptcy might be your only option." After weeks of selling and packing, Teresa stood in her empty foyer. 3 suitcases contained what remained of her life. Some clothes, basic necessities, and a few precious photos she couldn't bear to part with. The key to her new apartment felt foreign in her hand. It opened to a tiny space, nothing like the luxury she'd known. Teresa placed her suitcases on the bare floor, their lonely presence echoing in the empty room. Standing there, surrounded by blank walls and silence, she felt like a stranger in her own life. Teresa sat cross-legged on her bare apartment floor, surrounded by unpacked boxes. Her phone buzzed. Grace's name lit up the screen. Her finger hesitated before answering. "Teresa?" Grace's voice was warm, different from their last conversation. "I've been thinking about everything, and I was wrong. What Leon did to you? It's horrific. You don't deserve this." Tears welled in Teresa's eyes. "I thought everyone had given up on me." "Never. And you shouldn't give up either. Have you considered taking legal action? Leon manipulated you. That has to count for something." Something stirred in Teresa's chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. The next morning, she walked into a downtown law office, meeting with Sarah Chen, a corporate litigation specialist. The lawyer's office was modest but professional, with degrees and case files lining the walls. "Tell me everything," Sarah said, leaning forward with focused attention. Teresa explained the manipulation, the contracts, the deliberate financial trap. Sarah took detailed notes, occasionally nodding. "While this won't be easy," Sarah said, spreading out some documents, "there are angles we can pursue. We could prove Leon acted in bad faith, potentially even fraud. His pattern of behavior suggests premeditation." "What are my chances?" Teresa asked. "It's complex. We'd need to gather evidence of his intentions, possibly find others he's manipulated. But there's a path forward if you're willing to fight." "I am," Teresa said firmly. "I need to clear my name. I need my life back." Sarah outlined potential strategies: investigating Leon's business practices, gathering witness statements, analyzing the timing of his decisions. Each step would be challenging, but possible. As Teresa left the office, her steps felt lighter. The weight of despair still pressed on her shoulders, but now she had direction. She had an ally. Most importantly, she had hope. Teresa's hands trembled as she dialed the number for the Bay Area Chronicle. After 3 rings, a voice answered. "Marcus Reed speaking." "Mr. Reed," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I have information about Leon Smith's business practices that might interest you." She had chosen Marcus carefully. He was known for his investigative pieces on corporate fraud. Over the next hour, she shared details about Leon's manipulation, careful to remain anonymous while providing enough concrete evidence to spark his interest. "This could be significant," Marcus said. "I'll need to verify everything, of course." "I understand. I can provide documentation." Over the next few days, Teresa discreetly sent Marcus financial records and contract copies through a secure email. She felt a mix of anxiety and determination with each piece of evidence she shared. A week later, the first article appeared. Tech entrepreneur Leon Smith under investigation for financial misconduct. The story detailed suspicious patterns in his business dealings, unpaid vendors, and questionable tax practices. Teresa's heart raced as she read the article in her small apartment. More stories followed, each revealing another layer of Leon's deception. His carefully constructed image began to crumble as former business partners came forward with their own stories of betrayal. "Local businessman accused of systematic fraud," read another headline. The article included interviews with former employees who described Leon's pattern of setting up shell companies and leaving others to take the fall. Sitting at her kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside her, Teresa felt something shift inside her. For months, she had carried the weight of shame and helplessness. Now, watching Leon's carefully constructed facade crack, she felt a surge of strength. Her phone buzzed with news alerts as more outlets picked up the story. Leon's name appeared in business sections across the city, his reputation tarnishing with each new revelation. She saw his polished corporate photo beside headlines questioning his ethics, and for the first time since everything fell apart, she smiled. This was just the beginning, but it was something. Finally, the truth about Leon Smith was coming to light. Teresa smoothed her simple black dress as she walked into Bella's boutique, her heart pounding. The small shop, with its carefully curated collection of designer pieces, felt worlds away from her former executive office. "You have quite an impressive background," Sarah, the boutique owner, said, as she reviewed Teresa's carefully edited resume. "But why would someone with your experience want to work here?" Teresa took a deep breath. "I love fashion and design. Right now, I'm looking for a fresh start where I can focus on what I truly enjoy, helping people look and feel their best. To her relief, Sarah hired her on the spot. The next few weeks brought a steady rhythm of organizing displays, assisting customers, and learning the boutique's inventory. Though the work was humble, Teresa found herself smiling more often, especially when helping clients find the perfect outfit. "You have such an eye for style," one regular customer commented after Teresa helped her select a dress. "The way you put pieces together, it's like you really understand what works." The boutique's intimate setting allowed Teresa to build genuine connections with clients. She discovered joy in simple moments, arranging window displays, steaming new arrivals, and offering honest fashion advice. Her suggestions often led to sales, and Sarah began to trust her judgment more and more. "That display you created is bringing in so many customers," Sarah told her one afternoon. "You really understand how to showcase the clothes." Working with her hands and creating beautiful arrangements gave Teresa a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. Each satisfied customer and small accomplishment helped rebuild her confidence, reminding her of why she fell in love with fashion in the first place. As she locked up the boutique that evening, Teresa paused to look at her reflection in the window. Her life was simpler now, but there was a contentment in her eyes that had been missing during her high-powered days. This modest job had become more than just work. It was helping her heal and rediscover herself. The coffee shop buzzed with afternoon customers as Teresa waited, her hands wrapped around a warm cup. When Leon walked in, she barely recognized him. His designer suit hung loose on his frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Gone was the confident swagger that once commanded attention. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. His voice carried none of its usual authority. "What do you want, Leon?" Teresa kept her tone neutral, though her heart raced at seeing him so diminished. "Everything's falling apart." He ran his fingers through his unkempt hair. "The media coverage, the investigations, it's destroying everything I built. But you understand this business. You have connections, credibility, people trust you." Teresa took a slow sip of her coffee, remembering countless times she'd sought his approval, his love. Now here he sat, desperate for her help. "Please," he continued, leaning forward. "You're the only one who can help me salvage this. We could work together again, like before." "Like before?" Teresa cut him off, her voice sharp but controlled. "When you manipulated me? Used my guilt to trap me in debt while you had an affair?" Leon's face fell. "I made mistakes, I know that now, but we had something good once." "No," Teresa said firmly. "What we had wasn't good. It was control. You never saw me as a partner, just someone to use." "Teresa, please," he whispered, reaching for her hand. She pulled back. Standing up, Teresa looked down at the man she'd once loved, once feared. She felt no anger now, just a quiet certainty. "I won't help you, Leon. Not anymore." She walked away, leaving him alone at the table. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if she were finally setting down a heavy burden she'd carried for far too long. The boutique's bell chimed as another satisfied customer left, clutching a bag with her newest purchase. Teresa smiled, remembering how she'd helped the woman find the perfect dress for her daughter's graduation. These small victories brought her more joy than she'd ever felt in her previous high-powered position. "You have quite the eye," Sarah, the boutique owner, said as she approached. "I've noticed our regulars asking specifically for you." Teresa arranged a display of silk scarves, feeling warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. "I just love helping people find what makes them feel confident." "It's more than that," Sarah insisted. "You understand people, and you have vision. Have you ever thought about designing your own pieces?" The question caught Teresa off guard. I used to sketch designs years ago." "Maybe it's time to start again," Sarah suggested, gesturing to the store around them. "We could feature your pieces right here." That evening after closing, Teresa pulled out a fresh sketchbook. Her pencil moved across the paper hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Ideas flowed freely. A flutter-sleeve blouse with delicate embroidery, a versatile wrap dress that would flatter various body types. As she worked, regular customers' faces came to mind. She thought of Claire, who needed professional wear that wouldn't aggravate her sensitivity to certain fabrics, and Maria, who wanted clothes that could transition from office to evening events. Each sketch represented more than just fashion. It was about understanding women's needs and helping them feel beautiful and comfortable in their own skin. This wasn't about status or proving anything to anyone. It was about creation, connection, and starting fresh. Looking at her completed sketches, Teresa felt tears well up in her eyes. These designs were truly hers. No pressure, no manipulation, no ulterior motives. Just pure creativity and passion, flowing from her heart onto the page. Teresa sat at her desk one evening, staring at her phone. Her finger hovered over Grace's number before she finally pressed dial. Her heart pounded as it rang. "Hello?" Grace's familiar voice answered. "Hi, Grace," Teresa said softly. "I was hoping we could talk. Really talk." That call led to others. Over the next few weeks, Teresa reached out to family members and old friends she'd pushed away during her darkest times. Some conversations were harder than others. "I know I disappeared," she explained to her sister Beth over lunch. "I was ashamed and scared. Leon had manipulated everything. My finances, my self-worth, even my relationships." Beth's expression softened. "I wish you'd told me sooner. We could have helped." Not everyone was as understanding. Her cousin Marie remained cold, saying Teresa had made her own choices. Some friends never returned her calls, but Grace proved to be her strongest supporter. "I always knew there was more to the story," she said during one of their coffee meetups. "I'm just glad you're finding yourself again." Teresa watched the steam rise from her latte at their favorite cafe. "I thought I needed everyone's approval to move forward, but now I realize I just needed to be honest, with them and with myself." Grace reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You've come so far, and you're not alone anymore." Teresa smiled, feeling the weight of isolation lifting. Though not everyone had welcomed her back with open arms, the genuine connections she'd rebuilt meant more than any designer label or executive title ever had. Teresa's hands trembled as she opened the email invitation. "We would be honored to feature your collection at the upcoming Metro Fashion Showcase," she read aloud, hardly believing the words. After months of dedication at the boutique, her designs had caught someone's attention. "I knew this day would come," the boutique owner Sarah beamed from across the room. "Your pieces have that special touch customers can't resist." In the weeks that followed, Teresa threw herself into preparing her collection. The boutique's back room became her workshop, filled with sketches, fabric swatches, and half-finished garments. Each piece told a story of resilience and renewal. "The stitching on this needs to be perfect," she muttered, carefully guiding the silk through her sewing machine. Her designs combined classic elegance with modern touches, much like her own transformation. Local fashion enthusiasts who frequented the boutique offered encouraging words as they watched her work. "These designs are absolutely stunning," one regular client commented, running her fingers along a completed dress. "They're sophisticated but approachable." Sarah helped her refine the collection, offering suggestions about fabric choices and styling. "Remember," she advised, "stay true to your vision. That's what makes these pieces special." The night of the showcase arrived. Backstage, Teresa made final adjustments to her garments as models prepared to walk the runway. Her heart raced with anticipation rather than fear. As the lights dimmed and the music started, Teresa watched from the wings. One by one, her designs emerged on the runway, each piece a testament to her journey. The crowd's appreciative murmurs grew into genuine applause. Tears welled in her eyes as she saw her collection come to life under the spotlight. This wasn't just a fashion show, it was proof that she could rebuild on her own terms. The audience's positive response confirmed what she'd finally come to believe. She had talent worth celebrating. The morning after the fashion show, Teresa's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Email after email poured in from boutique owners and designers who had attended the showcase. Each message praised her unique vision and expressed interest in working together. "Have you seen this?" Sarah asked, showing Teresa another glowing review of her collection on a local fashion blog. "They're calling your designs a breath of fresh air in the industry." Sitting at her workstation, Teresa carefully read through each offer. Some wanted to stock her pieces, while others proposed collaborations. One message particularly caught her eye: an invitation to discuss launching her own independent brand with potential investors. "I think it's time," she told Sarah, her voice steady with newfound confidence. "Time to create something that's truly mine." Over the next few weeks, Teresa met with various investors and business partners. She approached each meeting with careful consideration, remembering the hard lessons she'd learned about trust and partnership. During one promising meeting, an investor named Michelle shared her vision for sustainable fashion. "What draws me to your work isn't just the designs," Michelle explained. "It's the story of transformation behind them. We need more authentic voices like yours in the industry." Teresa found herself opening up about her journey, explaining how she wanted her brand to represent more than just fashion. She wanted it to embody resilience and authenticity. "I envision a brand that's inclusive," Teresa explained, spreading her sketches across the conference table. "Something that makes women feel confident and empowered, regardless of their circumstances." The discussions progressed, and Teresa carefully reviewed contracts with her lawyer, ensuring every detail aligned with her values and goals. Michelle's investment firm offered terms that respected Teresa's creative control while providing the necessary financial backing. On a bright Tuesday morning, Teresa sat at her desk, the final contract before her. Her hand was steady as she signed her name, officially launching her own fashion brand. Looking at her signature, she felt a profound sense of achievement. This was more than just a business deal. It was her declaration of independence. Teresa stood in front of her mirror, rehearsing her speech for the Women's Entrepreneurship Conference. The invitation had arrived unexpectedly. They wanted her to share her story of rebuilding her life after betrayal. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed down her blazer, one of her own designs. "You'll do great," her assistant Rachel assured her, handing her a bottle of water. "Your story needs to be heard." The conference hall buzzed with energy as hundreds of women entrepreneurs filled the seats. Teresa waited backstage, taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. The event organizer touched her arm gently. "You're up next, Ms. Jones. Our next speaker turned personal tragedy into triumph," the host announced. "Please welcome Teresa Jones." Walking onto the stage, Teresa felt a momentary flutter of anxiety. But as she faced the audience and began speaking, her voice grew stronger with each word. "3 years ago, I lost everything," she began. "My marriage, my financial security, my sense of self-worth, all stripped away through betrayal and manipulation." The room fell silent as she continued, sharing the painful details of Leon's deception and her subsequent journey to rebuild. She spoke about the small boutique job that restored her confidence, the friendships that helped her heal, and the determination that drove her to create her own brand. As she described her transformation from victim to victor, she saw women in the audience nodding, some wiping away tears. "Rock bottom became the foundation on which I rebuilt my life," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I learned that our lowest moments don't define us, they refine us." After the speech, women lined up to speak with her. "Your story gave me hope," one attendee said, squeezing her hand. "I'm going through something similar, and hearing how you survived, it means everything." As Teresa listened to their stories, she felt a profound sense of purpose. Her pain had become a bridge to help others find their strength. This was more than just sharing her story. It was about showing others that they too could rise above their circumstances. Teresa sat in her office, surrounded by the fruits of her success. Design sketches, fabric swatches, and industry awards lined the walls. But today, her attention wasn't on work. She found herself leafing through an old sketchbook filled with watercolor paintings she'd done years ago, before life had become so complicated. The sight of her forgotten artwork stirred something in her. She realized that while building her brand, she'd set aside many things that once brought her joy. Art, travel, simple pleasures she used to cherish. Following this revelation, Teresa booked a trip to a small coastal town. No business meetings, no networking events, just her, the ocean, and time to reconnect with herself. The seaside cottage she rented was modest but peaceful. Each morning, she walked along the shore, collecting shells and watching seabirds dance above the waves. She set up an easel on the cottage's tiny porch and began painting again, capturing the changing colors of the sea. In these quiet moments, Teresa realized something profound. She no longer felt the gnawing need for approval that had once driven her. The woman who had desperately sought Leon's validation seemed like a stranger now. She had built something beautiful from the ashes of her past, not to prove anything to anyone, but because it was true to who she was. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Teresa sat on the beach. The gentle rhythm of the waves matched her peaceful heartbeat. She felt whole, complete in herself. The wounds of betrayal had healed, leaving behind not scars but wisdom. She didn't need to run from her past anymore. She had transformed it into strength. The grand venue buzzed with excitement as models, designers, and fashion enthusiasts filled the space. Teresa stood backstage, her heart full as she watched her team make final adjustments to the collection she'd poured her soul into. Each piece told a story of transformation, from delicate, flowing fabrics that spoke of vulnerability to bold, structured designs that embodied strength. 5 minutes, Ms. Jones, called one of the event coordinators. Teresa nodded, taking a deep breath. Looking around at the organized chaos of the backstage area, she couldn't help but marvel at how different this moment felt compared to her days working under Leon's shadow. The lights dimmed, and the show began. As her collection moved down the runway, Teresa watched the audience's reactions. Fashion critics leaned forward in their seats. Phones flashed constantly, and approving murmurs rippled through the crowd. Each design represented a piece of her journey, the struggles, the healing, and finally, the triumph. After the show, prominent industry figures surrounded her. "Brilliant work, Teresa," praised a well-known fashion editor. "Your evolution as a designer is remarkable." Others chimed in, expressing interest in future collaborations and investments. A famous department store buyer approached her with enthusiasm. "We need your collection in our stores," she said. "Your designs speak to women who've faced challenges and emerged stronger." As the evening progressed, Teresa found herself in conversations with people she'd once viewed as untouchable icons of the industry. Now they treated her as a peer, respecting both her creative vision and her resilience. Standing amid the praise and recognition, Teresa felt completely at peace. This success wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was the natural result of staying true to herself and her vision. The ghost of Leon's manipulation no longer haunted her. She had built something authentic and meaningful, entirely on her own terms. If you enjoyed the story of Teresa, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.